Let's go.
I agree.
We'll call this meeting to order. This is a work session for the Board of Education. Thank you all for being here this evening. We'll start off with we have on our agenda certain presentations and discussion items. First of that is a superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Biden. That's great.
Well, thank you. It's a really exciting evening that we're able to share with the board and the community where we are with the strategic planning process. The Board of Education started this process with our consulting group Insight back in January. The board created a mission, vision, core beliefs, and through our needs assessment, identified 6 strategic priorities, then handed it off to a steering committee of teachers, staff members, and community members. That group worked on the theory of action, the specific measurables under each strategic priority, and the work that needs to happen as a result of the plan that the board put together. I think it's really important to note that the board had a lot of input on this process on the front end, and obviously now we're coming back to you at the end of the process. You'll see that the core beliefs are listed here. You worked on it. It's really important to note that in red are some language that the steering committee suggested that you add in. I think it was community in a very broad sense initially when you created. The steering committee felt that if we could be very specific about students, families, and staff in the broader community, that we can talk about each of those stakeholder groups, it will be positive. Those are the 4 core beliefs. I think there's it's really important to also know that the foundation of equity is throughout this plan, and that started with the Board of Education. The vision statement is clear, building a culture of high expectations and equity in which all students grow academically and socially to improve our community and our world. The mission statement, again, there's a suggestion here in red, and I'll explain that suggestion in a second. The mission statement reads, the Clarke County School District is an ambitious community of learners in a diverse and culturally rich county. We are committed to equity and excellence through the implementation of rigorous standards in a safe and supportive environment on every campus, in every classroom, and for every child. We had, if you English teachers on the committee, they felt that it was important to talk about the fact that the implementation of rigorous standards was most important. I think the board talked about rigorous standards in a very general sense. The English teachers said that you have to do something with those standards if you're really going to make the mission work. Again, the board has been very focused on equity and making sure that equity is being applied throughout our school system. There are 6 strategic priorities. The first is academic growth. The second is social emotional growth. The third is organizational effectiveness, making sure that there's systems and processes and that we know where we're trying to go and what strategies we're going to use to get there. Fiscal health is number 4, ensuring that we are stable and that we're also investing in our facilities and being strategic in implementing funds. Professional capacity is the 5th, cultivating a culture that nurtures continuous professional growth, capacity building, and collegiality, and again, educational equity is the 6th priority. So again, this is the process. Here's just a list of the steering committee. It was a very good group of people who put a lot of time and thought into the work. They invested hours, not only during the planning time where we were together, but also offline and making sure we had the right information. It was a very diverse group. We heard from all corners of our community, and they, again, I think they provided feedback even in the areas of the work that you provided to make sure that this was a living document. So the theory of action, again, you passed off this work to our steering committee, and it was the responsibility of our group to come up with the rest of this plan. And so we're proposing that our theory of action is the following. Because the theory of action, before I jump into it, a theory of action statement should be an if-then statement. If you do these things, then this should happen. That's what a theory of action is for any organization. And so in our case, the theory of action reads, if the district deliberately works towards eliminating the marginalization of historically underrepresented groups through an organizational emphasis of increasing student achievement for all students through rigorous standards-based instruction, consistent progress on student growth plans, consistent focus on the social-emotional development of our students, constant attention toward equity practices, and accomplishment of the strategic plan, then we will increase student achievement and sustain educational attainment in CCSD. In other words, that lays out the work. That becomes the theory of action in terms of what every teacher, every staff member, every custodian, every food service person and employee is focusing on as a school organization and a school district. So our first priority is academic growth. You'll see that we have a goal statement and indicators of success. We really worked hard to make sure that our strategic plan just wasn't a group of words that would go up on a wall and we wouldn't be able to do anything with it, but it was actionable. It was something that would be measurable, not only for the Board of Education and working with me, their employee, but eventually everyone in the organization. Now, I won't read all of these to you, but you will see that we identify the point of 12 percentage points of growth. In the area of ELA or reading, we're currently about 30% of our students are proficient or distinguished. And math is a little higher, it's around 34%. And so we are suggesting in a 2-year period, we will grow by 12%. That means we're growing by 6% each year. We came up with that, those percentage points by looking at our current level of performance. We also worked with a steering committee to develop our SMART goals. There was a committee of staff members, teachers, and principals who said, we believe we can achieve 12%. There will be some in the organization and the community who will say, that's a large number. But keep in mind, if we achieve that number, we're still short of 50% of our students being proficient or distinguished. And so while the number may sound large on the surface, it is something that we have to strive for. Strategic plan or strategic priority number 2 is social emotional growth. We talked about this before in a board meeting. I think Mr. Davis has brought this up. We've committed to a social emotional learning framework called CASEL, C-A-S-E-L, CASEL, and it has 5 core competencies. And working with Dr. Dawn Myers, we have identified that we can take a look at the Georgia Student Health Survey, because we don't want to give our students more surveys. We don't want to take more instructional time away to test them and gain data from them, but we are obligated to provide the Georgia Student Health Survey. We can do a crosswalk of questions from that survey that ties back to the CASEL core competencies to see if students are growing or not in the area of social emotional growth. We've talked about this before, but the school district here in Clarke County is very happy and proud to be partnering with College Board and Avid to do a 5-year metacognition study of current students who are in 8th grade to see if they're growing in their own management of their thinking. We believe that attendance rates and incivility disciplinary rates is also indicators of if we are growing from a social emotional standpoint. Again, it would have been easy just to have that goal statement and to stop there. We felt that we needed to go deeper if we're going to truly be strategic. Strategic priority number 3, organizational effectiveness. The indicator of success is to ensure that each department will develop and implement core processes aligned to systems thinking, and that we regularly monitor efficacy of the core processes, at least by June 2019, and we continue to do so. What that means is that we should have a process for everything that we do in this organization, and you should be able to monitor and check back if that's happening. So, for example, we've talked about the fact that in our custodial area, it would be helpful if we had a checklist, just like you see in hotels or in restaurants, where certain hours of the day, someone is checking off and saying, I've cleaned this bathroom, I've cleaned this cafeteria. And to have someone responsible and accountable for that work is what A is saying. And then B is create an organizational dashboard and document the growth of our organizational KPIs or key performance indicators by November. It's important if we are organizationally effective that we have this up and going and be available not only internally, but externally. Fiscal health, you'll see the goal there, and the indicators of success is maintaining a fund balance of 15%. We're currently at 18%. Achieve a balanced budget annually. Meet or exceed key performance indicators established by business services and district services, and complete an analysis of efficient facility and space usage of all schools and buildings. That'll tie into the other topic that I have later this evening, but being more strategic and very focused on where we want to go, not only in today's environment, but long term. Yes, ma'am.
Would having a clean audit not be part of our fiscal health?
We feel that these indicators are actually more tangible for the public. I think having a clean audit is a good thing for us internally, but knowing that you have a fund balance of at least 15%, you have a balanced budget, that you're making sure that you're handling the money given to you by the taxpayers efficiently and effectively. The audit piece is very important to us as well, but that's more internal to make sure we are following proper protocols. We have 3 different goals under professional capacity. This was a very lively subgroup of our steering committee. The first is around professional learning. And we talk about the fact that professional learning helps us achieve our academic performance. We want to bring everything. If you notice in the goal statements, everything ties back to growing academically by 12% in 2 years. And what we wanted to do here is to build professional capacity by having teachers lead professional development. I'm also proud of our subcommittee that worked on this area, and that indeed we declare that there will be certain amount of time for district level professional development, school level professional development, but we also stay clear and allow teachers to have time for their professional reflection. And I think that's a pretty bold and clear message that we want teachers to reflect and have their own time to prepare for teaching.
Do you have a sense of what that currently is?
So under a 12 or 13-day professional development, professional learning calendar, it will come out to 5 days for district work, 4 days for the school level work, and 4 days for teachers.
And what has it been in terms of percentages in the past?
I don't know what has been in the past. If you remember when we passed the calendar for next year, I worked with a group from our teacher advisory board to create more teacher reflection time for them next year. I don't know what we've been in the past in terms of this type of percentage. The feedback I've received from the teachers was that it was not in the area of a third, almost a third of that time being given to teachers to control and to decide what they want to do during the day. In essence, that 31% is off limits from administrators. We have to make sure that teachers have that time. and they're able to do what they need to do. Now, for example, next year, one of the professional reflection days will be that Friday before kids come back in January. Is that there's a couple of days when we come back in January, and there's a Friday where we've designated that as a professional reflection day for teachers, just to get their grades done, to come back and get back into the groove of work. It could mean that a principal will provide breakfast and give an overview of welcome back. But then once that has taken place and you've fed your staff, principals understand that it's time for us to then pivot and allow them to be professionals. The second goal under professional capacity is collegiality. And what we want to do here is to allow our teachers to find ways to work with one another and to push one another and to grow from an efficacy standpoint. You have to have teamwork to truly grow in making this work happen. And so you'll see under the indicators of success, it's making sure that professional collaboration is happening in a way where teaching is not an isolated practice. It's not an independent practice, but it's a team effort in making sure students. And then the third goal is to recruit, hire, and retain. We take that very seriously. So you'll see some of the conversation that the board has been having all year in regards to hiring mission-driven, diverse staff is embedded in this goal. Having a formal induction program and making sure that we retain mission-driven and diverse faculty is really important to us. Yes.
So what's a good target for retention in terms of the school district? Since I'm still learning, what's good? Because obviously 100% is a little too isolating.
Yes, sir.
But there are also other numbers that aren't good. And so leaving out retirements, for example, what is a good number for resignations? It's a weird way to put it.
Yes. I think a district like Clarke County is very difficult to make that prediction because we are in a university town. For a lot of people, it's their first job and they student taught here. Right this year, we had 200 resignations and or retirements. So we had 200 people who left the organization. So in our opinion, if we can reduce that number by at least 5%, we're moving in the right direction.
How many certified employees do we have in the district?
I'll have to defer to you.
Yeah, sorry.
1150.
Mr. Davis.
When you, on the previous slide, you talked about teacher leadership.
Yes.
Is that going to be,
I'm sorry, you talked about teacher leadership. Is that formalized in some way or is it just kind of an informal, because some school systems have formalized, teacher leaders.
It's a great question. Through our transformation with the school growth plan process and establishing goals for each school, there is a school improvement leadership team that's been established in each of our 21 schools. There's representatives from each grade level or department on those school improvement leadership teams. We want to make sure that those individuals are not only leading on that team, but then they're taking their skill set and bringing it back to their teams. And so formally, yes, building principals will be able to identify who's moving their team in the right direction, who's analyzing student data and making sure that students are growing, and who isn't making that work happen.
Over time, can you see that being compensated in some way or
I think we woefully are behind in not compensating members of the school improvement leadership team. It will be something that we'll definitely think about and try to find funds in fiscal year 20. Yes, ma'am.
And so as piggybacking on what John asked about the turnover, We do currently manage and actually track our turnover rate for the district. Can that be one of our indicators on our dashboard so that we can see at each school level, what that churn looks like, and maybe we can then assess whether, in our minds anyway, does that impact what we're seeing in terms of other performance indicators?
Letter C is going to be very detailed. And so part of it will be asking, if you read the language of it, did we retain mission-driven and diverse staff?
Yes.
And so asking individuals, were you aligned with the work? Were you aligned with the equity work that the board and the district has said that they want to dig into? I think that's the first level of the conversation, right? Because there will be some people who will leave, and when they leave, they will say, I was not aligned with what the Clarke County School District wanted to work on. And from that perspective, from an employment standpoint, that's okay. That's okay that they made that professional decision. So what we want to do is make sure that individuals who are aligned to the work, are we able to retain them? And if we are able to retain them, that's a step in the right direction.
So I'd like to
And
see
so yes,
retention.
if you're asking us to drill down by school level,
Yes, just share that information. Don't do anything extra, but again, just to share that so that we have that holistic view of what's happening in that particular area.
yes, ma'am.
Please.
We're capturing it, thank you. And then you have your 6 strategic priority of educational equity. In terms of access to educational programming, you'll see that under indicators of success, we want to minimize pull-out programming. And we also want to ensure equitable access to gifted and talented and AP or advanced placement programming for underrepresented students by 6% annually. This is probably the most bold of the most audacious of the goals, right? Because it's taking equity and actually putting it in action.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why we felt that it was important for us to structure the strategic plan this way, where it wasn't just words, but there's action that everyone is being held accountable for. So access to educational programming was number 1. The second is student discipline. And then we want to reduce out-of-school suspension rates for students of color. We want to reduce out-of-school suspension rates for special education students. And we want to increase documented communication between classroom teachers and families by 60% as a baseline. We believe that if the classroom teacher touches base with a family before a student gets totally out of control, the need for that student and that family to engage administration goes down significantly. And it also ties back to relationships. And so that's the reason why A, B, and C is there for indicators.
On the previous slide, you can decrease disproportionality in one of 2 ways, by bringing sort of the bottom up or the top down. So is there a way to kind of talk about this goal or articulate that our interest here is bringing more people to a higher place as opposed to the opposite?
Yes, and we talked about that for a long time. And that's why I think the indicators of success are structured the way they are. So minimizing pullout means you take your baseline and you minimize how many students are being pulled out for that programming now. Ensuring equitable access doesn't mean that you are bringing down everyone to uplift other groups that have been below. It just means that you're providing access to everyone for underrepresented groups in particular by 6%. If we would have said just increase, and that's where we really struggle. If we would have said increase representation of underrepresented students by 6%, that could have meant, from a statistical standpoint, you're bringing down white students. That's not what this says. It just states clearly we want to make sure that underrepresented students are being provided access. It's also important to note that it's not about race in many of in B. It could mean girls in certain. It could be a gender issue in some cases. It could mean a lot of different things. And so we were very purposeful in the language that we use with B. So hopefully we try to avoid the image that people are thinking that we're bringing down one group to uplift another. That's not the case. And what we're trying to do is lift the tide for all, so then all boats are rising high.
And this is where that equity is a non-zero sum
That's right.
concept, kind of plays out.
And but it's difficult to write the language, the indicator that way to make sure that everyone sees it, that it's a zero sum game. It's not about bringing some group down to bring another group up.
I think your microphone clicked off.
Did it go off? Maybe it's good. I'm okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
So we ran into, in the past, some conversations with our administration about the disproportionality of our discipline disproportionality. And so administrators heard or felt told that, or maybe they were told, I don't know, I just don't want to be accusatory, to not write up certain students or to not discipline certain students so that we could eliminate or reduce the gap in disproportionality. And this was a huge conversation, and it centered around the Cedar Shoals incident, where that's when it was really kind of brought to the surface. Can you speak to indicator success A and how that is not what we're not trimming back in that direction?
Thank you for that opportunity. We wrote A and B in particular, A and B with that in mind. We do not want to send a message to our administrators that if a student deserves a suspension, that they're not suspended. But research shows that you suspend a student and still keep them in school. I look at the administrative team at Cedar Shoals who've come up with a very creative way of suspending students, yet keeping them in class next year, or not class, but in school next year, I should say. And so it's not I don't want to call it an in-school suspension, but it's truly a suspension place where students they're paying the consequence for their behavior, yet they're still in school to receive their education. And so that's why I'll try to get through this and then maybe we'll change the batteries later. So we had that in mind to tell us that this should not be about withholding discipline if a student deserves it. I hope that answers your question.
It does, yeah. I just
Because I want to be clear that that's not our message. If a young person deserves a suspension, they should be disciplined. But we also believe that an out-of-school suspension should be the most severe of the discipline that you provide. There are ways that we can still provide educational service to a young person in school. And so in that case, the principal is still sending a message that discipline is necessary, but the student is receiving an educational service. For microphone's sake. And then goal number 3 under strategic priority 6, educational equity. We clearly state that we understand that it's critical that we have to accelerate the learning for historically marginalized families and students. And so while we talk about a 6% annual growth, we are suggesting that for students who fall into those underrepresented groups, that we will add an additional 6% for them. So in essence, we need to grow by 24%. That's our goal for underrepresented families and students. And I say families and students because the families are also impacted when there isn't growth for their young people. And so we're suggesting an accelerated growth on our indicators of college and career success and also Georgia Microsoft. Thank you, Rob. That's the strategic plan that we've worked on. Again, I can't thank enough the steering committee that helped us. They took their work very seriously, and that work actually started with the board. I remember in January where the board said we want to make sure that you have a very large, diverse group that's part of that steering committee. They dug in and really did good work for us, and so that's where we are.
Can you speak to me about how how that group, the individuals in that group came about?
We look for diverse people in many different areas and people who had different opinions and thoughts and perspectives on the school system, and we brought them together. We invited them to be part of the process. They were willing to give up a portion or all of their day for 2 days. We shared with them that they were charting a new course for our school district from a strategic planning perspective. I enjoy strategic planning. It was good that we had Dr. Thomas come on board right when she did. So Dr. Thomas and I served as a great team in making sure that the work was accomplished. Much of this work was done locally. Once you turned it over to us with the steering committee, and their voice is very clear in all of these statements. But we also want to be statistically and from an accountability state very sound. And so you will see those goal statements are SMART goals. By a certain time, you will be able to measure some. And then we also have indicators of success. Typically, in strategic plans, people will create a goal statement that isn't time-bound. There isn't any results that you're looking for, and there are no indicators to determine if you're moving in the right direction or not. So we took a different path with this plan.
In terms of being time-bound, so should we anticipate a year from now, for example, at some time, a check-in, right, that says, we go through the same goals again, and here's how we're doing on this one, here's how we're doing on this one, with the numbers that are indicated.
I'm really excited in being here for almost a year now, because instead of me talking about what we don't have in place, we can start talking about what we can do. I want to thank the board because you took a leap of faith in engaging around balanced governance. Candidly, and I've said this before publicly, balanced governance doesn't work unless you have a strong strategic plan. And that check-in has to happen more than just annually. It should happen at least semi-annually, if not quarterly. And there should also should be visuals from a dashboard perspective where not only the board, but the public can measure and see where we're moving based on this plan. And so that's our intent, to continue to build this out. This is just the beginning of the work now. Now we have to ensure that we're very public and accountable about what we said we were going to do, and provide you governance opportunities to see if it's happening or not. At the same time, it becomes the work, right? So you can't deviate from this. This has to be our focus. And if you take a look at this document, it's very student-driven from an achievement standpoint, but it also addresses the whole child. It also addresses our organization in terms of how efficient we are, how we're using our funds. I think it's comprehensive in terms of what we want to become as an organization. So it will be more than annually. We're collectively not doing our governance work if that's not what we're constantly focusing on. If you remember from the training from Dr. Tom Alsbury, he would say, if as a board, you're not checking in on these components on a monthly basis in your meetings, something's going afoul. And so I would hope that as now we can dig deeper into balanced governance by having this structure.
Dr. Means, in terms of state accountability, I know we're focusing on the milestones. The state uses other indicators too, and I'm just wondering if they kind of, everything we've got listed here kind of meshes together.
Actually, it does. You'll note that we're looking at other measures such as our NWEA MAP scores. Our college and career success indicators also talks about the investment that you voted on last month around our standards-based assessments that the curricular coordinators came and spoke to you about. Hopefully, as a board, you're starting to see things kind of come together now, right? So you approved the NWEA MAP assessment. You approved the the standards-based assessment. Actually, with your approval of Avid, now we can measure to see if we're growing students academically and also from a social emotional standpoint. So everything that has been presented to you this year, you should see it embedded back into this work to see if it's working. There should be constant program evaluation, and if things are not well, we need to fix it. If it is going well, then you replicate it and you expand it and grow it. The other component, Mr. Davis, of your question, which is a really good one, is that's the benefit of being a charter system school district. And so there's a lot of talk right now of providing charter systems and with the ability to have an alternative testing tool. And if you remember I think it was last week maybe, that we were here for a meeting, the more we can get away from talking about the milestones and talk about other measures, not to over-test our kids, but to have different types of measures where it's just not based on a summative assessment at the end of the school year, the more likely we can move away from a deficit-based approach to an asset-based approach of looking at our kids. In other words, just because you don't do well on milestones doesn't mean that that's the end all of growth. Maybe a student grew in NWA MAP scores, they grew with our standards-based assessment scores. Maybe it didn't come out in milestones, but the more we can show growth, the better. You'll see that in your consent packet, we want to move forward with creating a student growth model where families will have what I like to call is the equivalent of an academic baseball card for a student, where when a teacher sits down with the families, there's a card that can show, here's who Greg is, and here's where we believe he will grow this year. And here are all this is what he looks like academically, from a behavioral standpoint, here's his interests, and is he growing? That will become a much more valuable tool to teachers than what we currently do in our profession, which is to say, go to their CUNE folder and find out about Greg by reading the CUNE folder. If we can create a model like we've presented in the consent agenda, I think we're really starting to transform how we talk about student growth in Clarke.
I have another question. So you mentioned the charter, and I know you had members of LSGTs on the committee. So can you talk a little bit about how the role of LSGTs and our relationship there in the goals that we talked about?
When you talk about local school governance teams, their number one priority, as I read the charter system, is ensuring that there is growth happening on the individual school growth plan. And so if you are a member of a local school governance team, it's your responsibility to make sure that there's growth happening for that individual school and what they've identified as their growth goals for the next 2 years. And so in many ways, they're replicating the work that you will be doing at the district level, the system level, with the system strategic plan. So in essence, a school growth plan is the equivalent of the strategic plan for a school. That's the role of LSGT. And they have to make sure that they're meeting with their building principal on a monthly basis and asking the same questions that now you should ask of me of where's the progress? How are we moving forward? What are the action steps that we're putting in place to make this happen in terms of the goals that we all share? And if you remember when Dan Weber made the statement that in many ways a local school governance team is the equivalent of a board of education and the principal is the equivalent of the superintendent in that local situation, that's the primary work. I think we didn't talk about that role during the first rollout of training, but that's the work. The work is to make sure that there's growth happening for each school based on school growth plans. And so going back to what we talked about earlier, when we started the process of developing the 2-year school growth plans, that's the primary function and focus of the local school governance team. Thank you.
Dr. Mead, following up on what Jared asked. So, I mean, these are very specific goals that we've established for the district. And is it fair to say that the local school governance teams will, the expectations that they will raise these goals and then help work with the central leadership and the board to carry out those goals? I mean, is that, I'm just trying to understand the.
No, sir. It's a great question. While we were developing these goals and working with our steering committee, building principals were working with their teams to develop their 2-year school growth plans. And so those 2-year school growth plans are very specific, they're very detailed, and they're very measurable. And so you remember from the presentation from the curriculum coordinators, that plan, do, study, adjust cycle is something that the board and I will be working on. And at the school level, a local school governance team and a principal should be working on as well. It's very subtle. I appreciate when people walked up to me all this year and they would say, "So what are you going to do? What's the big splash?" And if we're building the organization appropriately, there shouldn't be a big splash. It should be we're doing work differently and we're being more strategic about the work. And so in a very succinct way I can share with you, this is doing work very differently in Clarke County than what we've done before. Maybe we've done it like this in the past, and I've had principals say under prior leaders, it was this specific, and they are embracing this opportunity to go back to this work. But in the last 3 to 4, 5 years, this hasn't been the way that the school system has worked. This is not the way that we approach the work. Building principals are excited about this approach, and it's locally driven because each principal worked with their team to develop their own school growth plans, and now they know that the primary function of their relationship with their LSGT is to provide feedback on if the school is making progress on that work. I can't emphasize enough, that's the power of the local school governance teams and charter system.
Okay, I guess, specifically, let's say teacher retention. When I first got on the board, we were given information that related to teacher retention, but it's always for the whole district. And it wasn't until much further, I've been on the board a couple of years, that we finally got it broken down by individual schools. We didn't know what to do with that information once we had it, but is that in terms of what we're given on the dashboard and what's shared with the public, these goals will be school specific. Am I right?
Some of these goals lend themselves to being school specific, some do not. The ones which indicators are school specific, we'll make sure that they are. And once we have that dashboard up and going, if you want us to drill deeper, we can.
Thank you.
Thank you for that report, and I'd like to publicly also thank the strategic planning committee for, on behalf of the board, for all the work that they put in. This is critical work, so we appreciate that very much.
And I'd like to just, again, thank you and commend you, because I got feedback from 2 people that worked on this plan, and they were very complimentary of the process, felt total ownership of it, and so I'm excited and believe that we are moving forward with fidelity.
Great. The next item is in the superintendent's report, West Broad School property update.
Thank you, sir. I do have an update, and I'll just kind of read off of what I have here. The future use of the West Broad School property is complex. There are competing internal and external interests in the property, and they all have merit. They all have strong merit. My role and responsibility as superintendent is to ensure that all of the facilities in the district are maximized for student use and to advance the district's strategic plan. So when you look at the strategic priorities of 1, academic growth, 2, social emotional growth, and 4, physical health, it's really important for us to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as we continue this conversation. From a long-range facility perspective, I think the West Broad property is important. But what I have found is that there are other competing facility, school attendance zone, and long-range planning issues that must be addressed. Let me just give you a few. We have limited seat capacity for early childhood education opportunities. And I remember vividly Mr. Payne asking the question, how many students have signed up for early childhood education? How many seats do we have? And so we know that we don't have as many seats that we need to serve our community. We have an imbalance of student population between certain schools in the district. Mainly when you look at Cleveland Road School, Whitehead Road School, and Oglethorpe, there's an imbalance there. And the question I have is, what's the interconnectedness between that imbalance and School C? Which the board had a plan of building a School C that would have potentially balanced things out. You made different plans and you built a larger Whitehead Road School, for example. And then consequently, you built a larger Oglethorpe Avenue School. How does the use of the Whitehead Annex impact the space capacity of Whitehead Road School? What's the impact of the Maxine P. Esom attendance option zone and its impact and effect on Gaines Elementary School? As families who live in that zone, I think Mr. Davis brought this issue up to me early in the fall, as I was still trying to figure out where things were located in the community. He said, well, how does that impact Barnett Shoals with Davis and Gaines? And I think that's something we need to look at. At the completion of SWASH 5, what's the future of the old Gaines School? What happens there? And how do we prevent what happened with Barber Street School? And frankly, what's happened with West Broad in terms of having a long-range plan of investing in a facility that may not become a school anymore? How do we assist in accommodating the program expansion of the Athens Community Career Academy? We have a very talented and gifted CEO in Lawrence Harris. We have an ambitious board of the Career Academy that wants to continue to see growth. And frankly, we have a business community that wants us to continue to find pathways for young people to complete their high school education in our district and then go on to the workforce if that's what a young person chooses to do. How do we help facilitate that expansion? And then finally, the district offices. We're currently using 60,000 square feet of space between this building and in the Whitehead Road Annex. If we have parameters of needing at least 60,000 square feet, if we have a parameter of needing at least 250 parking spaces, if we have a parameter of needing at least one multi-purpose community room that can meet the capacity of 100 adults and have that room converted to a board meeting space, a professional learning space, a community meeting space for groups that want to meet there. If that's the prerequisite, then how does all of this work together? And so as I've gained feedback from community members, as I've listened to the board, what I'm finding is that you can't do one of these things in isolation from the other, that it all ties together. And so to that end, what I would ask the board to do is to give me some time. Give me some time to work with an internal committee of administrators and people who are impacted by all those different items that I referenced. At some point in the process, we will engage external stakeholders for feedback and input, but allow us to work through all of these competing interests that we have as a school system to accomplish what you just saw on the screen in terms of the strategic plan of being very strategic and long thinking from a planning perspective in terms of what we want to do with all of our facilities and what's our needs for students and student learning. I don't think we've taken the step back just to have that conversation. Because all of these different things that I just cited to you are they're holdovers from years of leadership challenges and other challenges that the district was unable to get to. Really hard work, but important work that needs to happen. And so we will be using the summer to dig into this work and to really think it through and to kind of lay it out the way I just done it. It's taken me some time to just step back and not get honed in and locked in on one issue, but what I believe to be a very layered issue and a very complex and complicated challenge that we have before us in terms of not only West Broad, but all those different components that I shared with you. So that's my plan. I would hope to come back to the board in the fall with a comprehensive plan to address all of these different issues. But what I'm finding is if I talk and try to address the district office issue in isolation from West Broad, in isolation to School C, in isolation to other issues, and it feels like we're not being very, again, not to beat up this word, but strategic and long range thinking. I think we have to just be more disciplined in our approach, and that's what I would like to do.
Great. Questions? Go ahead, John.
So thank you, Dr. Means. One thing I want to be clear about is the evolution of your thinking on this, because if I remember correctly, we were talking about owing it to the community to have a vote by the 14th of June. And so can you kind of give an explanation of why it's now going to come back in the fall?
Because when I think about all the other issues that I've been working on in isolation, I do see a connection with West Broad. If you remember, I shared with the board that I wanted to come to you and talk to you about the long-range facility plan, and I haven't forgotten about that. What I'm realizing is that the use of the West Broad building and long-range facility planning, and one issue that I didn't mention here is the use of modular and portable classrooms. You're going to be asked to act on the use of portable classrooms at Chase Street School on the 14th. That's continuing to grow. It's interesting that our Citizens Oversight Committee that works with all of our facilities has asked the question of me of, well, why do we have so many portables? I don't think it's due to poor planning. I think that we have seen a shift in our population, which is another issue that I didn't mention here. That's how complicated this is. Historically, we've always been about a 12,000 student school district. We are right now at 13,600 students. And so there's an increase. We're seeing a population increase. How we adjust to it is really critical. So really good question, Dr. Nance. I think my evolution of thinking is as I've really reflected on trying to be thoughtful and giving a good answer to the West Broad issue. You start playing out all these different components of what about the old gang school? What about district offices? What about portable school, portable classrooms? And I believe we need to all step back and look at all of this in the totality of how are we programming student academic options for kids.
And also, we're going to say, I really appreciate that. I think we absolutely must have a comprehensive assessment of exactly who we are, where we are with our facility. Just as you've done the curriculum, we really need that background information, the baseline to tell us exactly who we are with. And I appreciate that. I look forward to the plan that you bring to us on which we will get to have.
And I know you can't see their crystal ball or anything at this point, but want to talk just a bit about, some of the board's interest and we, did post notes and kind of thought about some uses there. Obviously, there's lots and lots of community interest and input there, and while community interest doesn't dictate what we do with buildings, it certainly is not irrelevant to what we do with buildings. Do you have a sense for what that engagement might look like?
I want to frame this work first with our committee, first with our committee, and then impacting it and working with external groups. I want to frame it in terms of what are we doing to use our facilities for student programming. And that's what you hired me to do. I think once I start venturing off in other areas, I'm not being very helpful to you as a board. And what I'm realizing is that there are student programming issues that we have. Let me give you, again, just to show you how the dominoes fall. There is a belief that if the early childhood, 4-year-old kindergarten, pre-kindergarten classes were pulled out of some of our elementary schools, that would open up more space, which would then eliminate the need for portable classrooms. So now if you have more early childhood education classrooms in other places, maybe now the domino falls in a different perspective, in a different place. And so I want to stay focused on student programming. I'll give you another example. Every time in the board at the Career Academy, they're holding me to it. I've made a commitment to them that if we can find programming and we have student interest, we being the district office staff, we need to leave this facility in the name of letting students explore career pathways. But that has a trickle effect. That has a trickle down effect to everything that we do. So the first priority, Mr. Biden, will be, are we properly using all of our space for student programming? And I appreciate the comment that Ms. Davis made. I've used this first year to rebuild with our team, and a lot of people put a lot of work into this. We've rebuilt our instructional infrastructure. Now it's time to figure out where do we place and where do we teach young people in terms of facilities. That's something that I think we just haven't been as comprehensive and strategic about. I think it was Ms. Williams that made the statement a week or two ago of, why did West Broad deteriorate in terms of its standing? Why weren't we putting money into the building annually, even if you weren't using it? I am aligned with that type of thinking. So I'm already starting to think now of, so what do we need to do with old games? We can't just let it sit there. We have to have some type of vision for how we're going to continue to maintain it. I came in at the end of the process of Barber Street School and what happened there, but the stories that I received was that there wasn't a lot of money put into Barber Street, and eventually the roof started caving in, and the upkeep wasn't where it should have been. I believe that even when a school district owns a building, you still, even if you don't have programming in it, you have an obligation to keep it functional. And because you never know when the children in your instructional program will need it. And so we just need time to step back and to be proactive in thinking that way. But that the work will be in the name of, where do we have needs from an instructional standpoint? And how can we relieve space for our teachers and for our schools from a program standpoint district-wide? Because when I think about what's happening across Clarke County, we need to step back and be more comprehensive in terms of how we use space.
Mr. President,
Sure, yes.
and I think I've said this before. I've been in this community and also been affiliated with this school district for 43 years. And I can recall when the first Spielhaus was launched, which was in 1990. See, leadership was a part of that. I'm saying all of that to say this, portables, I don't like them, and I still work to a campus. But it is my belief we are never going to get rid of totally get rid of portables. The reason they grow in this community, and also we live in a transit community, and from school year to school year, some schools don't ever know what population of students you're going to have. I know Dr. Means mentioned a week ago that Clarke Central is going to have 1,800 students for the next school term. And you have to take into consideration all those things. Again, yeah, portables, and I still work to a campus, but it's just my belief that we're not going to ever get rid of portables. When we started out the first ski loss, and I said to the ski loss committee, you know, you need to stop pushing that. In the ski loss, that past this ski loss, we're going to get rid of portables. It never happened. And here we are in ski loss 5. Thank you very much.
Sarah, go ahead.
If I can just go back to a couple of things that you said. We've already done, years and years and years and years and years of not consistent, but inconsistent conversations and work on the list broadly. So much so that I can't even remember all the different, I can't even begin to remember all the different conversations that was trying to get. So I asked myself, and I've talked to a couple other folks, and been like, why is this decision so hard? Why is this such, if you get down to the nuts and bolts of this, why is this so impossible to move forward with? And I think you nailed it. I think it's so hard because it was an isolated conversation, not in totality. And so I really appreciate the fact that we're going to take a look at it in a holistic way with space across our district, and it's conversations that we've been having sporadic. A lot of these, it's synthesizing all the conversations that we've been having about space. But my worry is that we're going to hit the rewind button on some of the work that's like, we're going to redo the work that's already been done, which if it needs to be redone, then it needs to be redone, and we need to redo it. But at some point, we can't keep coming back and having the same battles and the same conversations and the same struggles that we continue, we've had for years. We can't, are we going to go back to doing the work we did as a board? Are we going to go back to engaging the community? Are we going to go back, I just hope that taking this information that you're proposing and synthesizing it with the work that's already been done, it will move us into a forward motion and not hit the rewind button. The other thing is, not that I want a controversial policy on my back, but we probably need to have a vacant building policy in our policy manual, and we don't, I don't think. And so, anyway, we need to add that to our policy agenda potentially.
Carol.
I mean, I could come in along those lines. In our policy, one of the items, and I don't know if we took it out or not, but the property committee was to annually evaluate the property daycare of the Clarke County School District. As long as I've been on the board, that has never been done. And there's some things that need to be addressed, and we should be physically doing that as part of our responsibility. And I hope that did not come out of that policy, because it is certainly needed to.
Thank you.
John, go ahead. And not to get too far ahead on all this, but I think that one of the few things that we can look forward to with this is it's going to take a lot of money to do this. And so could you just give a very high level overview of how we're going to do this? I'm kind of interested in what the possible funding mechanisms might be, not too detailed, but just do I need to get out my credit card? I think is what I'm asking here.
It's going to be expensive. I think that's why I'll tie your question, Dr. Knotts, with Ms. Ellis's question. We don't want to hit the rewind button either, but I think putting everything on paper and having a comprehensive report of this is where things stand, not only with buildings, but also attendance zone areas and how that's impacting buildings, and the use of portables is really gonna be important. In terms of cost, let me just kind of give you, 'cause I think this question's come up with the board before, a very high level of just the West Broad cost. Currently, West Broad has 32,800 square feet. The question was posed to me, and maybe it was last week by Ms. Williams, of, so how much will it cost to just make that building operational again? We're making an estimate, but if you just take $200 based on the state of that building right now, $200 per square foot, that's $6.5 million right there. If you have to now start doing site work and look at stormwater management, now you're talking another $1 million to $1.5 million. If there was this thought at some point under my predecessor that could be a district office, you would have to have a 2-story parking facility. Typically, that goes for $20,000 per slot or space. If you need 250 spaces, that's a $5 million facility. And so those are the types of exercises we will start going through. That was just one of many. We have to do the same exercise with old games. We have to do the same exercise for figuring out where do you place district office, the district office if the career academy is growing the way we want it to grow. We'll bring all of those costs to the board to look at. It's going to, I think one of the reasons why, and I hate to use this phrase, but I think one of the reasons why this conversation in its totality has been kicked down the road, the can's been kicked down the road, is because of the price tag. And how much this may potentially cost if we're comprehensive about addressing these issues.
So, in transparency, in my experience, I came on board in 2012. I sat in a meeting as a board member where this facilities use plan was presented to us. Every single building, every single portable, the unused building. And so at that time, I think we had 2 properties and then some additional properties that people were interested in purchasing that we actually had an inventory. So that information is here. It's just someplace now. It hadn't been several years since I saw that. But that is what I'm looking for. And you described it perfectly. When we put all that picture together, then we have a better view of where we're going to go here. And I don't think that stops, other people from having an interest in acquiring a property that we own. We've already seen that with the planned schools that we acquire property to build, and we haven't built yet. And that's in Eastern School, the other school on the west side of town. And so all of those things, I think, are those unknowns that you'll get to address in the role that we hired you to do. So I'm looking forward to you having more fun.
Yes, Jonathan. So if I could just return, so just from the very big picture, to my understanding, having come out of finance committee and so forth, we're in good shape, but we're not in that good shape. We're going to talk about using fund balance for something else a little later, but this is beyond fund balance. And so then our options would be.
I think it's premature for me to respond to that just yet. But please know that's my way of thinking.
But what I said was right.
You're absolutely correct.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
I would like to respond to Ms. Williams and the policy question. I did find it in the feedback packet right here. Based on my visual, when I'm looking at this, I don't believe that we changed the property committee language in any way, shape, or form because there's nothing highlighted, and I have to go back and look at all my notes, and I don't have those with me tonight. The word annually is not in that. It says the property committee shall evaluate and determine the condition of all buildings and grounds of the Clarke County School District, and the committee shall review. It's on, but it doesn't say the word annually. So I can't imagine that we struck the word annually in our conversations, but I think that would be a great addition to put in there, and that is a good segue into our next conversation. But so I made a note on my sheet, but I don't think we changed that language And the word annually is not in here, but I do agree that absolutely should be.
Thank you. Great, thank you for that report. The next item on our agenda is policy committee update. So, an update.
So the policy committee, which is Greg, Sarah, Carol, and Linda, has been hard at work in conjunction with several of our board members who have attended the meetings as well, and some of the policy discussions that have happened in the full board setting. And we have finally completed our work on the B's and C's, which are board operations policies. Next week, we will vote to place the full packet for public review, just like every other policy. But because this was such a large conversation and the policies were so dependent on each other, we elected, or we discussed many months ago, that it would be best to bring the whole packet to the public instead of continually bringing in isolation, because oftentimes we had to go back and make revisions that we had already made and reevaluate language that we had already decided upon in our committee. So this is 11 months, I believe, in making, and I think we're all ready to move forward from it. But of course, if there are some edits, then we need to make them. So these will go up before, up onto the website for public comment June 14th to 15th, should the board move forward in that direction at the next meeting. And we don't have a meeting in July, so actually it will stay up for close to 60 days. And if anybody has any questions, edits throughout the process, there's a way on our website that you can provide feedback. Board members, you can do it that way, or you can email the committee members, and we can, just like adding word annually to the property committee language is a great suggestion. This sorts of things will continue to refine, and 3 pair of eyes is helpful. And so anyway, that's it. Anything else I don't think. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got one, Sarah. I'm trying to get my timeline correct. So when we put something up for community input, we then we would vote on it in our next public meeting. Okay, I'm trying to address the situation we had last month where we had input on the same day that we voted, and I'm just trying to, I don't know.
So if there should be like a cutoff, like a couple days before.
Somehow or the other, I feel like that, I'm not trying to stretch this thing out, but, if there is a policy where there's a good, large amount of community input, we may not actually get it until the day up. And so I'm trying to figure out how.
That's a good point. And this is a huge packet. And so on the one hand, we were kind of like, oh, wow, that's good that the public has 60 days to review because it's a big packet. But on the other hand, you make a very good point. Because it's such a big packet, we also need time to reflect on the community comments. So I wonder, since I believe we're obligated by law to put it up for 30 days, right? So I wonder if we can't cut it off after maybe like 45 days to give the board an additional 15 days to review the public comment or something like that. And is there a way to note that on the website, like public comment will be open until such and such date? I'm looking at Dr. Beans, Angela, Dawn's.
Do you want to make it 45 days?
I think that seems reasonable. It's kind of split the difference, and it's more time than the law requires, but gives us time to digest the comments. That was a great point, Greg.
So is it possible then to just pull the ones that are creating content? Because I don't think every single one of those
Can we just come up with a plan once we see what we get instead of trying to I mean, hopefully it's perfect and everybody agrees that it's perfect and we just move on down because it's time to get back to another different kind of business with the policy committee, but, of course, I know.
Until zero sum game either, so I mean, we can get some of it done, let's get it done, it's not controversial, something that we need to revisit.
Yeah, I think let's just come up with a plan after the 45 days, once we look at the comments that we receive and how much work is still left to discuss it, whether it's just small edits or whether it's big topics.
And we'll have a work session to see it, and then at the voting meeting.
Correct, so we'll have a first work session in August, and then we'll close the comments after 45 days. From June 14th, so that'd be like August 1st, actually, I'm not looking at the calendar. Hold on 1 second. When's our first, meeting in August?
It will be August 2nd.
So that probably, 45 days may be a little too long. Because from June 14th. 42, that would be 43 days would be July 27th, and if our first meeting is August 7th, August 2nd. But we would go until August 9th. So, July 27th? July 27th?
July 27th.
42 days.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up, if there's a way of getting at the end of those 45 days, getting us the comments, would be really critical.
Don, we haven't had, except for that one, which was just a last minute comment, just arrived that day. Prior to that, Don usually kind of hit the forward button right as they came in. So I can ask her, would y'all rather her forward them right as they come in, or Angela forward them right as they come in, or would y'all rather her kind of hold them and send them all in one
I'd rather
day?
get them when they come in, and then if we need a comprehensive list later on, that'd be
That we can do
fine.
that too. Okay, so Angela, as they come in, as comments come in, if y'all will just forward them along to the full board, that would be great, and then we can kind of digest them in small bites instead of in one large.
Great, thank you. We also have a report from the Government Relations Committee.
I've got a couple of comments I want to make. First off is that OBIA is at the summer GSBA conference, and we introduced to the GSBA Operations Committee 3 items for them to consider, or GSBA to consider in terms of platform, so to speak, when they lobby with the legislature. One of which was accepted. The other 2 were not. We had about a third support, and they both dealt with federal issues on immigration. Ovita just wanted me to make the announcement that she is bringing that forward tomorrow at the GSBA summer conference, and so just to notify the board that we don't need to re-vote, we've already voted, but she's pushing those forward, which is another vehicle if the operations committee doesn't accept it. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the Government Relations Committee is meeting next Tuesday, and I had a conversation with Dr. Means, and we're exploring how the Government Relations Committee can kind of spearhead some type of communication with our local government officials. And so we're going to continue that discussion this week, and so we will be having a Government Relations Committee meeting, and Dr. Means and I will be working on, what that looks like in terms of, what are the cross connections between the school board and the county commission and the work of the county as a whole. So,
Thank you for that. Moving on down through the agenda, we have a number of information items that are part of our packet.
Okay, check it out.
You should check it out. This is our 10th board member series. So the first is the Community Oversight Committee, Citizens Oversight Committee, SPLOST monthly report from May 2018 as part of our packets. Any questions or comments around that? The next item is SPLOST 4 and 5 reports, May 2018. And the next item is Early Head Start Policy Council meeting minutes and reports from May 2018. Any questions around that?
I did get through every single page this time, Karen.
Sorry, I missed you. What?
I just said I got through every single page this time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And the next item is the Parent Advisory Board meeting. Is there one for this month? I imagine the answer is no.
No, sir.
That was mine, okay.
We also have a number of draft board action items for our meeting next week. We have received minutes of previous meetings, including the work session meeting from May 3rd, 2018. Any changes or to those minutes? We also have regular meeting minutes from May 10th, 2018. Any changes or additions to those? We have a special meeting, May 17th, 2018. Any changes or additions? We have a special meeting, May 31st, 2018. Any changes or additions to those? Yes.
I just got
a comment. I think having not been at the meeting and actually viewing it through YouTube, we really need to speak into the microphones, for if people are going to utilize the the videotaping of our sessions. Many of y'all I couldn't hear.
Great, thank you. That's a great comment. We also have financial reports, April of 2018 as part of our packet. And next week, of course, we'll receive a full report from Mr. Hamill on those items. We have a number of policies, regulations, exhibits to be posted for public review for 4 weeks.
42 days.
And you have them right here.
That's right. They'll be up for 42 days, that's right. I will refrain from reading all of them. But it is a long list and it's a good list, and I commend the policy committee for all the hard work on for many months on putting this together. So those will go up. But for the purposes of our meeting, any questions, concerns about this list of policies that are going up on the website for public input? Great. And then item number 4 is we have a policies to adopt for sent. These are policies that have been up. Policy GAN, policy IDAG, policy JCDA, and exhibit JCDA E1. And have we received any public comment on any of these?
No, sir.
Okay. Anything from the board? Any of these? Okay. Good. We have a list of items that is proposed we can include in our consent agenda. These are items 5 through 19. First is a list of out-of-state and overnight field trips.
Oh, consent.
I have one comment on these, if I might. I think this packet is my mind always goes right to these are more expensive field trips. And often there is a portion that the students are contributing to the ability to go on this field trip. And so my eyes go right to how is this a field trip that includes students as opposed to excludes students based on the cost of the field trip. And I think in our packet, we saw the spectrum of field trips that did a really good job at explaining the efforts that they went to make sure that no child was excluded from this field trip. And we saw some of the write-ups that didn't mention it, kind of took it out entirely. And if we could send a message that's important and that we want to see not only, oftentimes they say, well, scholarships are available, and it's hard to know what to do with that information, but I think, for earlier conversations around making sure that these things are equitable exercises, it's important for us to know that they're not exclusive.
Thank you for that comment, and I would encourage the board to continue to look at these field trips from that lens. If we're truly about equity, then that starts with classroom field trip opportunities. There's a researcher and author by the name of Richard Milner who has worked in our district in the past, and we will be bringing him back to the district to work with us. He talked a lot about opportunity gaps. As we talk about in our equity training, we shouldn't talk about achievement gaps, we should talk about opportunity gaps. And when you work with some students in our district, they are what Dr. Milner would call school-dependent students. And so they depend on the school to provide those opportunities, Mr. Bobby, that you're speaking of, that come through field trips. When we don't create access for those young people to pay for those opportunities, we're denying an opportunity. So thank you. We will deliver that message to all. Please continue. That's a balanced governance approach of monitoring that's happening. So thank you.
And just for the sake of getting a shout out where it's due, the one that I really enjoyed reading was the Clarke Central High School Southern Interscholastic Press Association Quiz Bowl in Columbia, South Carolina. The next item, number 6, is the approval of special inspection and materials testing services contract for Hillsman.
That's it.
Thank you. I had one question there, and this was an item where there were 2 bids, and it was there were different bids, and we ended up going with a higher bid. Can you tell us why that makes sense?
Yeah, when the bids came in, the quantities were not the same between the 2 testing firms. So what I did was I made the quantities the same. And the low bidder, when you look at unit prices and apply it to the same quantity, his bid would actually be higher. And based on past experience of projects, the higher bid that originally came in from Nova was more accurate in line with the quantities that we required for the test for the project. So that's why we were trying to compare apples to apples. When you've got such a variation in quantities, to make it fair, you look at unit prices and apply it to the same quantities for both firms.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have number 7, approve the 2018-2019 school resource officer contract with ACC government. Thank you. Approve lease of modular units at Chase Street Elementary School.
Consent. Can I just make a comment about that though?
Yes, please.
We've said this like so many times, so I just want to say it again. This is where my professional role comes into play. It's impossible to predict the growth at our schools that are in town, that are landlocked, because the housing turnover that's happening over there is when older people are moving on from their homes, and or right now in the current climate, we have a ton of landlords selling their rental houses because values have increased so much. And all of those are getting snapped up by young families wanting to send their kids to the schools. And there's no way to look at a growth map of vacant lots or our traditional methods that we have used in the past to predict the growth at the schools that are that don't have any unbuilt neighborhoods, right? Because that in the past has been where we've kind of looked. So there's several schools that are gonna fall into that category as we continue down any everywhere in town. Where a brand new neighborhood isn't moving in, the housing changes are what's driving a lot of that. So I don't know how you fix that, but I just am saying, I don't know how you're gonna fit the growth.
Thank you. Number 9 is renew annual bid extensions with the following companies: U.S. Foods, Sample Institutional Foods, Date Paper and Bag LLC, and Uniforms Unlimited. Thank you. Number 10 is produce bid for school nutrition.
Consent.
Thank you. And number 11, a milk bid.
Kids gotta have the milk.
Gotta have the milk. A lot of milk. Thank you. And number 12, right along with it, we have ice cream bid.
Same thing. Consent.
Thank you. Number 13, a memorandum of understanding, Rutland Academy CCSD, also dealing with school nutrition. Thank you. Number 14 is action to apply for Head Start Early Head Start Cost of Living Adjustment Supplemental Grant.
I read number 30, consent. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Get them for the raise.
And number 15, action to approve student growth model system. This is right. This is Dr. Means. Want to say a word about what this is?
Yes, it's a tool that does actually 3 things. One is it provides the ability for us to statistically look at the propensity of potential growth of a student on the front end of the school year and during the school year, and to see if that growth is actually happening. 2, it provides a personalized learner profile for students. Again, I referenced earlier that baseball card, if you will. And then number 3, it provides a dashboard that aligns to our strategic priorities that we talked about earlier. So it shows, again, it's from a school improvement growth standpoint. So the concept is growth and improvement, and this tool provides, we believe, 3 different layers of accountability and making our growth visual versus talking at people, making it visual for internal and external stakeholders.
Thank you. And I think we even talked about this. This is not the first time we've seen this. I think we talked about it in concept several months ago, right?
We talked about it in concept. We needed to build the infrastructure of things like NWA map, the standards-based assessment tools, and other things to get to a place where we had something to measure.
Great, thank you. The next item is the approval to amend fiscal year 19 budget to include carryover funds for award LSGT innovation grants.
I'd like to just hear a little explanation on that before
There was a total of approximately $198,000 of grant funds that schools requested to use, and we need to carry it over. They made the request. The request was such that it's going to go into fiscal year 19. That the approval was made, but we need to provide those funds. And there was a commitment to those local school governance teams to allow that use of fiscal year 18 dollars to go into fiscal year 19.
But there was a larger overall total than 190. Was it 525?
There was a total, the overall budget was 520. I think it's actually 634. And there's some schools who didn't submit innovation grants. There's some schools who maybe submitted an innovation grant. They were eligible, let's just say, for $50,000. They used $35,000 of it. That money stays in fiscal year 18. It's the earmarked dollars that LSGTs asked to carry over in fiscal year 19 that we're requesting the approval to carry over.
That's state funding.
Yes, ma'am.
That's it.
Thank you. The next item is number 17, action to approve contract with Catapult Learning for alternative ed services.
I would appreciate that not being consent. It's nothing, not that I see anything to be concerned about, but I would like more time to reflect on it. And perhaps ask questions next week.
Great, thank you. So we'll take number 17 off the consent agenda, and that was one of mine as well. I think there's Exhibit C talks about some of those metrics, so it'd be nice to get a sense of, A, how it's going, right? And B, what are.
We'll be prepared.
When we're going to make a conversation about that, right?
Just as a side note, Dr. Means, as we develop the dashboard, will our individual programs such as Calico be part of that dashboard? Is that what's anticipated?
No. Not an individual program like Catapult, no. I'm really excited about the student growth model, in that we are able to measure the impact of programs. And if those programs are actually, so you can do program evaluation, we'll statistically be able to slice and say, the number of students who are in this program, did they grow the way that we wanted to? Now, if that's what you're asking, yes, we can't take a program like a Catapult and measure its effectiveness, if you will. That's what this student growth model tool does for us, statistically.
Thank you. Then number 18 is action to approve for one column UGA partnership. And I had some questions. Can you briefly explain? I had a hard time understanding from the content of that contract what exactly we were.
I'm going to defer to our executive director of special education, Eddie Hill, to address any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. for being here.
Could you restate your question?
Can you give us an idea of what is encompassed, what services are encompassed by this $180,000 contract? What that is?
Some of you may be familiar with a partnership that we had titled Three Columns. And this was a partnership that has been in place for the last 2 years between the University of Georgia and our King schools. That partnership provided 7 of our elementary schools with a behavior analyst for 20 hours per week. This individual is a board certified practitioner who provided intensive support for individual students, who provided coaching and kind of preventative approach in the classroom and support with teachers, and also professional learning, both at the school base as well as systemic. We had numerous conversations, and we have watched that partnership very closely for the reason that you just, it's a lot of money. And we wanted to make sure that we were leveraging that money in the best way to help maximize our students, not only their access to their standards, but their emotional, social learning progress, as well as their academic achievement. And in doing that, we of course had countless conversations with principals to solicit their feedback. And the last meeting that we had, the principals, while they unanimously wanted and voted for the continued partnership, the biggest piece of feedback we received from them was, could we concentrate this level of expertise in a couple locations, and can we use that as another layer of support and really expand our continuum for all students? And so I'm sure my time frame is not accurate, but at some point, I believe you were presented with a variety of, Dr. Triggs, I might need your help a little bit, of the disciplinary center / Project Grow, like a framework for additional layers of support. And in that, the 2 classrooms that have been presented to the board in terms of another layer of support, this partnership would take that support that we have spread between 7 schools, and it would place it strategically in those 2 classrooms, one on the east side and one on the west side. And it would provide the district with 4 behavior analysts still working 20 hours a week, So that would be equivalent to 2 full-time positions and would allow us to provide intensive support along with a certified teacher employed by Clarke County for those students who have been identified just need a restart, need that 6-week period of time to get intensive therapeutic support, while we then work to not only have a plan to reintegrate them back to their home school, but also to overlay that with additional support. I will say that when we compare that level of expertise at this price tag, if we were to hire that level of a BC or behavior analyst, board certified at 20 hours a week, it would be significantly more expensive. I know that that is a lot of money, but the level of expertise that we're receiving, as well as the oversight from UGA, Dr. Ayers, Dr. Liddell, Dr. Ardeman, they are in the classrooms, they are supporting our teacher, they're supporting our students, and supporting their board certified behavior analysts as well. Did that help somebody?
So the 4 people you're talking about are different than the 3 professors?
Yes, in addition to, we get all of that expertise, yes, sir.
And is that in both, that is for that $180,000 price tag?
Yes, sir. And in fact, if you just separate that, it's basically we pay $28,000 for each behavior analyst. So for every 20 hours of that board certified behavior analyst, it costs the district $28,000. To put that in perspective, if we were to hire a paraprofessional, the average rate I believe we're using these days would be $38,000. And that is an individual that does not have that same level of expertise. The other, I think, critical piece to this is that because we've watched this partnership so closely, the response that we're getting from students and the progress that they're making, it has just been exciting to watch. And so, they did a presentation, I think in February, where they looked at the overall, what have you done? What have we gotten for the money? And literally broke it down so that they have been in 42 classrooms, and this was through the past model of 3 columns in 7 of our elementary schools, 42 classrooms. They have provided direct teacher training on a one-on-one basis to 19 of our teachers, and they have worked with 71 of our kids. Now, these are our most intensive kids, and the most exciting piece about this is that out of this 71 students, all but 5 of them were able to remain in homeschool and with no other changes. So we got them back on track, and so as we really explore ways to push and leverage resources to students, it was a very successful model, and students made significant achievements. So we're just looking to take what we've done, watched and partnered with, and had in place in the past, and just reframe it a bit so that it aligns with principal recommendation, as well as another view for how we can add another layer of support for our students.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I've got a question. Because I'm very enthusiastic about us going in this direction, but I have a lot of questions, and I don't know whether to just pull it from consent and raise my questions next week, but that would be more appropriate, I think.
Yeah, and specifically, maybe if you we can work over the week to either they're about this contract specifically or about the overall framework generally.
I will communicate that.
Okay, so we'll pull number 18 as well.
Thank you, though.
And then number 19 is action to approve CABER demonstration classroom proposal. Any questions or concerns on that?
I'm hanging here because that was mine too, so.
Looks like none. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and then item 20, we have a list of personnel recommendations. Any questions or concerns? Not for the consent agenda, but this is to be addressed separately next week. Any questions or concerns about the list generally? Is it a separate list? We have a separate list on the.
There's one in the back of the packet for next, but there's one for our next meeting.
That's right.
Here.
There's one for your meeting, your called meeting that happens immediately after this meeting.
Yeah.
The individuals are for.
Okay, great. So this, we're referring to just the list that is teed up for next week. Sounds like I hear none.
It's a long list.
It's a long list. Okay, if there is nothing else, then we will adjourn this call meeting and move on to our work session.
No,
Oh,
that's
the
not-
call meeting.
That is-
During our work session. The call meeting is fun, so. Okay. We will. Do you have your agenda?
The first,
Sorry. So we will call this meeting to order. This is a called meeting of the Clarke County School District. Thank you all for being here. Dr. Meeks, would you help us with the roll call?
yes, Mr. Davis here, Ms. Ellis,
Here.
Mr. Worthy here, Ms. Davis,
Here.
Mr. Bybee,
Here.
Ms. Williams,
Here.
Dr. Nance.
Here. Our first item is to amend and or adopt the agenda. The agenda received by email is as.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Moved by Mr. Worthy, second by Ms. Davis. Thank you very much. Any questions or concerns around the agenda?
Wish we had.
I think do we have the copies in the back? Let me see if we, no, that's from the work session. Yeah, it should be, back here.
We didn't get any printed ones. It's what we're debating.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of adopting this agenda? Any opposed? Thank you. We have a number of action items. The first action item is to approve K-8 English Language Arts curriculum adoption. Dr. Meeks.
Mr. Bybee, thank you, board members. We presented this this curriculum need to you last week. I won't present the curriculum adoption recommendation, other than to say that we believe that it's critical that we have this adoption happen. The real conversation was around the payment structure for the board, and thank you. So I mentioned this verbally last week, but I just want to share it in writing with the board. There's three options that the board has. The first is a lease option. And what we tried to do, what I tried to do in this chart is to give you an advantage and disadvantage to each of the three options. With a lease option, it protects the district's cash flow, if you will, in terms of our ongoing cash flow. The disadvantage is that the district would have to pay interest. The overall interest on that lease for 24 months would be $80,000. The second option is to use fund balance. There will be the advantage is that there's no need to borrow funds. We currently have a fund balance at 18% compared to the fiscal year 19 budget. The recommended level for fund balance is 15% per the state. And it is an appropriate one-time cost. When you use fund balance, it should be for a one-time cost. It will reduce the amount of reserve funds. And it's important to note that when we track our cash flow for next year, there will be a reflected deficit on our cash flow documents that Mr. Hammond presents, because we've already constructed the fiscal year 19 budget, we have to have some way to demonstrate that we've used fund balance. The third option is to reduce the existing fiscal year 19 budget and to then go into another reduction of operational costs for fiscal year 20. The advantage is the budget is balanced right now, so we know where we can find the funds. The disadvantage is that to balance the fiscal year 19 budget, we've already reduced the operational budget by 5%. It would be pretty devastating for our operational budget to be cut by another $1.75 million. So our recommendation is to use fund balance for this curricular adoption is a total of $2.75 million. We have a textbook adoption budget of $900,000. We would use $500,000 of it from fiscal year 18, $500,000 from fiscal year 19. That would be the $1 million, which would leave us with a remaining $1.75 million. The total cost is $2.75 million. We would use $500,000 from fiscal year 18, an additional $500,000 from fiscal year 19.
So since we haven't closed out 18, you're speaking of using 18.
Yes, ma'am. So we would use 18 upon, if you decide to approve this evening, the expenditure, we would then earmark $500,000 for fiscal year 19.
So financially, how does this work, and what are we spending this money on? Are we getting written materials, textbooks? What is this for? And are we front loading with ordering some things in 18 and then the rest in 19? But my second question following up on that is, if we are spending this money, we would be amending the 19 budget as well, showing a deficit, right?
You would use fund balance. On your cash flow documentation, it will show that there's a deficit, because that's how you have to demonstrate it on your cash flow sheet. But you would not be in a deficit, you would be using fund balance. So the fiscal year 19 budget would still be balanced. To answer your first question in terms of what are we receiving, last week in the presentation, we showed that there will be classroom libraries provided for every student and every classroom teacher based on their reading ability level. It also creates a baseline assessment tool that's tied back to those reading and literature tools that is provided to each classroom teacher.
So a lot of this is material content.
It's all materials, and it's text rich. And so what we mean by text rich is that there are multiple books provided to young people at their reading level. And so within a classroom setting, instead of having some kids go to a different place because they're reading at a different level, the teacher will have access to multiple levels of reading materials depending on the ability of the student.
And so beyond, I mean, obviously books are good for a while, and then they also need to be updated. So beyond the initial 2 years and the big libraries in each of these classrooms, how do we maintain supporting what we built?
So one thing that we're working on right now, and I think we talked about it actually in the fiscal committee, the financial committee meeting today, is looking at our 5-year textbook adoption cycle. It is really important for us from a fiscal standpoint to construct a cycle where we can look at and project when these costs are going to come up again, just to be proactive. And so we'll put ELA now on the 5-year cycle, and we will come back in 5 years to replenish or refresh what you're purchasing or considering purchasing this evening. So it's really about being disciplined and having a cycle, not only from a curricular standpoint for teachers to know when curriculum are going to be revised again, but it's also a financial tool for the board to know when a large adoption like literacy or math is coming up.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, you raised a good point about, the cycle of adoption of curriculum, because you know, back in the 90s when I was actually teaching, that was standard. And then I guess during the recession and all this kind of thing, I don't even know, are they even, is on the, in the state of Georgia, are they even talking cycles of textbook adoptions now, or is every school district on their own, or?
Now every school district's on their own. There was a time period where the entire state adopted a certain curricular area at a certain time. When the recession hit, it became every school district on their own issue. And so that's why we're really working hard to develop our own cycle so we can project and prepare ahead of time.
And yes, go ahead.
Just kind of a follow-up, but anyway, you know, the one thing that I'm still trying to wrap my mind around is, you know, being a charter school system, I mean, we should be responsible for ourselves. And the proof is in the pudding in terms of how we perform. On the other hand, you know, you've got the state still kind of like the milestone testing, you know, saying that, you know, this is a measurement that we're using. How in the world do we mesh a state-of-the-art curriculum that's been developed, you know, for school systems to adopt with what our legislators are mandating, and I just don't know how the two mesh together.
They mentioned that they're both aligned to the Common Core state standards. So it's a standards-driven curriculum that ties back to not only Common Core state standards, but Georgia standards in particular.
We did this a little bit backwards by having a conversation before we had a motion, but we have a recommendation from our superintendent to approve the K-8 English language arts curriculum adoption. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation.
And the second? Thank you, Mr. Worthy and Ms. Ellis. Any other questions, concerns? Yes.
I would like to include in the motion an actual financial funding for this, to be very, very specific where it's coming from. Because we were given three alternatives, and one alternative is a little bit of a mesh.
The recommendation, that's a great point. The recommendation was to use the fund balance for funding of this ELA adoption, and that should be reflected in the motion from Mr. Worthy and seconded by Ms. Ellis. Thank you.
And I would like the exact amount in the funding source. Yes.
Well, I made the motion, and Dr. Means has already mentioned what the amounts would be, and he did it in increments.
And the minutes can reflect all of that.
Our policy has been requested to, anytime we approve the expenditure of funds, to have clarity where they're coming from, and it should be more in the motion.
Well,
would you like that restated, or would you like it just reflected in the minutes?
Yeah, to be able for me to vote on something, I would need to know where the funds are coming from.
Sure. Mr. Worthy, would you mind restating the motion, and specifically where the paying for it's going to come from?
yes, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to use the fund balance to pay for the K through 8. I can't recall what that last statement was.
ELA curriculum adoption.
Okay.
In the amount of $1.75 million.
But that's not what
So
the superintendent said.
may I
Please clarify.
I think the motion should, if I may.
Sure.
The motion should state that $1 million of the adoption will come from general funds. The additional $1.75 million will come from fund balance. So there's two different funding sources. $1 million is from the general fund, $1.75 million is from fund balance.
And even to be more specific, 500,000 from the general fund is FY18 and 500,000 is FY19.
Of the $1 million coming from general funds, $500,000 is from fiscal year 18, $500,000 is from fiscal year 19.
So the motion could state those three funding sources.
Okay. I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to fund the K through 8 ELA, I believe it was, Now, you said $1 million from general funds.
And of the $1 million fiscal, $500,000 is from fiscal year 18, $500,000 is from fiscal year 19.
$500 from, $500,000, which is $500,000 for,
fiscal year 18.
18, and then $500,000 for fiscal year 19. And the remaining amount was what? 1.7 million from the fund balance. That's the motion, and it's already been seconded.
Great, so that's the motion. We have a second by Ms. Ellis.
Discussion,
absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted, for clarity's sake, and this may be for Larry, by using the fund balance to that extent approximately, how far does that bring us down from 18% down to mid-16%? Okay.
So we still in good shape with the fund balance.
I just want to make sure.
Oh, I'm happy you asked the question, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
And this is for 1 year. This is for fiscal year 19.
Yes, ma'am.
And then 20 will be an additional 2.75 mil.
No, ma'am.
Okay, this is a 5-year cycle, so this is an upfront 4 or 5 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hence why we have on there is an appropriate one-time cost. It's paying for the adoption at one time. That's why it's an appropriate use of fund balance.
As opposed to using fund balance for general
Annually.
operations.
Yes.
Thank you. Great, go ahead.
I just have just a question. In terms of the $500,000 for 2019, we're gonna pay them up front, right, for this product? We're not gonna. So I'm not sure how you.
We're actually behind from a purchasing standpoint. If we want to make sure that the material, all the materials are here by July 30th, so teachers can have them in their classrooms ready to go. They're actually waiting on us to make this to go through this process right now. And so that's why it's appropriate to use fiscal year 18 and 19. It's really in the world of textbooks. This is not ahead of time to get the order going. You have to purchase it now.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just trying to think. We haven't even developed a budget yet for 2019, have we?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
all.
all.
18, 19.
Yes.
Okay. A little bit.
So we have a motion to approve the K-8 ELA curriculum adoption, paying for it $1 million from general funds, $500,000 from 18, $500,000 from 19, and 1.75 from fund balance, which has been seconded as well. Great discussion. Any other final discussion points? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is, action item is to approve the CCSD fiscal year 19 budget.
Mr. Bybee, board members, we've had 2 board presentations, there have been 3 community presentations on the board, on the budget. Not to reiterate what has been stated in the past, but we're pleased to present to you a balanced budget. The Finance Committee also received some very encouraging news that we're trending in a positive manner for this current fiscal year, which will actually, is proven to the last conversation, is actually adding to the fund balance because we're trending in a positive way. We believe that this budget is focused on lowering class size, which again helps school-dependent children. We're really pleased with what we're able to present to you with this budget.
Thank you. And the recommendation?
The recommendation is for the board to approve the fiscal year 19 budget.
So thank you. Go ahead, Greg.
So moved.
Move to approve the CCSD fiscal 19 budget.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis.
Actually, Charles.
Second by Charles Gordon. Thank you so much. Any questions?
I just want to make sure, there haven't been any changes to the budget since since,
The presentation last week.
and then were there any changes from the public hearings to the presentation?
Any questions?
To answer that question, Dr. Knotts, I think the most interesting conversation we had was with some coaches from one of our two high schools regarding costs in the budget for transportation for student athletes during the summer. And we were able to have that conversation and discuss it. And we talked it through. We came to, there was a concern about money not being in the budget. There, we were able to make sure that the money was in the budget. It was always there, it just wasn't communicated at the school level.
And there weren't any changes with nonprofit groups?
Nonprofit, I don't remember what you mean by the question. But that's all. If you can clarify that, I will be more than happy to answer.
So no changes from last week or from the time that we had public input sessions?
No, if I am reading it, again, I have to take what I've been presented. The only nonprofit there has been a nonprofit that has made a request of the school district. I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but Family Connections, Community and Schools has made a $200,000 request of the school district to help pay for site coordinators. Was that maybe what you're referring to? Okay. And there was I believe the question was, have we adjusted our fiscal year 19 budget to address that request? The answer is no. We haven't, and candidly at this point in juncture of the development of the budget, it would be difficult for us to do so. I think it would be more prudent for us to let enrollment happen, take a look at our class sizes after Labor Day. If there's something we can do to contribute to Family Connections communities and schools, once we know where all of our class sizes are, we've met needs in that space, and we also have determined that if we have no needs to hire our own counselors, then we can have a conversation around, do we invest into that nonprofit? I came to the school district very enthusiastic and happy and excited about having Family Connections, community schools in our school district. But when given the charge of either having $200,000 given to the nonprofit or keeping the $200,000 to make sure that we have lower our class sizes and or we hire our own counselors, I think that would be a very worthy conversation to have at the board level. But no, we have not made that adjustment based on that request, Dr.
Thank you for that explanation. Great.
Along the same lines, Dr. Means, have we been able to assess the effectiveness of the community schools program?
You know, as a nonprofit that really does an amazing job and help us, we have received information from the executive director, and it's been very positive information. It's not our program to evaluate its effectiveness. It's a nonprofit that we partner with, and we're very pleased with the partnership. And based on the data that we've been provided by Family Connections, communities and schools, it's been favorable.
You know, I guess, if I could follow up, like we had the discussion about California.
We're just going to address, currently we're talking about the CCSC 19 budget. Is it relevant to the approval of the budget?
Well, I mean, we've got an item that's been left off, or not left off, but it's not included. And so I don't know, did we discuss that or not?
Left off the budget?
Well, not left off, but it was not included in the budget.
Which item is that?
Which one?
Which item?
Well, we're talking about community schools.
So let's just be clear. So Family Connections, community schools, and I appreciate the way Dr. Knotts described it. It's a nonprofit that is not a part of the school system. They made a request for district funds. Our first priority is to make sure that we have funded and we are staffing the program for our school system and our students. If we have the ability to make a donation of $200,000 to a nonprofit, then that is something the board would have to discuss. I would just be, I would also ask you to think about what precedent you would be setting. So there's a lot of nonprofits in Clarke County that also help and work with the school system. So here's a precedent that you have to think about. What if Books for Keeps find themselves in a tough spot one year? Will you make concessions and find dollars in the budget to help Books for Keeps? It's a very worthy and good program, and it works with our schools directly. That's the precedent that you have to think about. But I think that's down the road. The first component of this is that the request for funding has come at a juncture where our budget is prepared for you to act on this evening. I think what we have to do is make sure that we have the funds to ensure that our program is functional and functioning well. If after the midterm and after we have determined there's no other needs, then I think there's room for consideration. That would be my recommendation.
If I may, it's really a moot point. The gratuity clause in the Georgia Constitution prohibits donations of taxpayer funds to non-profit corporations, no matter how old.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have a motion on the floor to approve the budget. We have a second. We've had some great discussion. Any final bits, discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Action passes. Thank you. Motion passes. The next item is to approve the fiscal year 19 military.
Part of the budgeting process is to set the military for the fiscal year 19. That recommendation is to set it at 20 months.
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the FY military, which is 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Worthy. Is there a second to the motion? Ms. Davis, thank you very much. Any questions around the military? Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is to approve surplus technology, the sale of surplus technology items.
Mr. Bybee, per policy DO, the disposition of that is school property disposal procedures. It states the board shall have the authority to sell any unserviceable or surplus property at its discretion before any selling or disposal is made of the property. An estimate of current worth over $1,000 or shall adopt a resolution declaring the property is no longer necessary for purposes and authorize the superintendent to conduct a sale or disposal. And then again, it goes on to say that the board shall reserve the right to sell surplus property at a private sale. We have declared that we have computers that are no longer necessary for school purposes. We have found a buyer that would like to buy those laptops. In talking with our technology leadership, the last time we distributed and sold laptops, it actually became a problem for the school system that the school district's logo is ingrained on those laptops. And furthermore, it's difficult to have updated software on those tools and those devices. And so many community members who purchased those computers felt that it was really a waste of their funds, and it was not as profitable as it appeared to be. We think that this is a much more prudent direction. Our recommendation is to sell the surplus computers.
Thank you very much. We have a recommendation. Is there a motion? There's a motion to sell the surplus property and a second by Ms. Ellis. very much. Any questions?
That it? I'm sorry.
Give me 1 second, Ms. Williams. Just double check. It was 215 devices of different, either Dell or HP, 215.
And they're gonna be sold at a fair market value?
We are making a profit from the sale to a company who then, whatever they do with the device.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, and thank you for pointing out the policy. Discussing why this is on our agenda and why it is we're talking about it. Any more questions? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Great, thank you. We also received a list of personnel recommendations.
And Mr. Bobby, that long list is what we are asking you to act on this evening. If you remember about a month ago, we stated that this is the time of the year where there's a lot of motion. And so you see that list. Not to say that one hire is important than the other, but we did make a commitment to the Wick Davis school community that we would have a recommendation for them this evening. I think it's important to note before I give the recommendation that I recall that as I was transitioning last year, we were making principal hires as late as late June. And so the fact that we're able to make the final recommendation by June 7th is something that Ms. Duke and her team should be commended for. We are recommending to hire Dr. Daniel McGuire for the principalship at Wick Davis Elementary School. He recently concluded his service at West Side Elementary School in the Marietta City school system prior to being at West Side, which is a very good school, it's a high achieving school. He worked in an urban setting in DeKalb, and so he brings a wealth of experience. He's a veteran principal with a terminal degree. We're really pleased that he has chosen us, and he went through a process. He has expressed a deep commitment to the Wick Davis school community, and we're looking forward to him serving that community for many years.
Thank you for that. Is there a motion to approve the personnel recommendations?
So moved.
Okay, Davis, thank you very much. In a second. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Any questions or?
Yeah, I just want to compliment, the staff, the human resources, and because one of the concerns that had been expressed to me by Wick Davis teachers and parents was that because of the lateness of it, that the selection process may have been very, very limited. So it seems like that was not the case, and so I'm very pleased.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, our final item is to adjourn this meeting. Motion to adjourn by Ms. Davis, and seconded by Dr. Knox. All in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.